My niece Ashley medaled in the Junior Olympics in track, and she went on to be a Pac-10 athlete at University of Arizona on a full college scholarship. And like most, if you've worked with your kids or teens in all those sporting events, you know that leading up to the Junior Olympics, there are all these big events. And she was involved in this one run in Oregon the weekend before the Junior Olympic trials. And she said that, when you're involved with the kids, they watch everything, don't they? They watch the videos and the track and all that stuff. So at the time she was running, Marion Jones was running. And Marion Jones, before the drug testing, was the fastest woman in the world in the 100 and 200 meters. And that was the event that Ashley ran, the 100, 200, and 400 meters. And she was only 14 years old at the time, but her times were coming, she was chasing Marion. I mean, her times were coming up to be really fast. And when she got to college, she was just only a few tenths of a second off of Marion Jones' time. She had matched FloJo's time a couple of times. And so she was really disciplined in her work, in her sport. So she was at this event in Oregon, and she noticed that when she drew the lane, she drew lane 4, which was the same lane that Marion had run that track, run an event on that track, and had also run in lane 4. So Ashley was pretty excited. She said she got down to the track just a very few minutes early, because you can't get on the track until your event, your run is called. But she got down there a few minutes early, and she said it was amazing because she bent down and she put her fingers on the starting line where she imagined Marion had put her fingers. And she said, I tried to put my fingers in the exact same place where her fingerprints would have been, because I wanted to lay my fingers over the top of a champion. And then she said she wondered what Marion might have been thinking in that moment, in that lane, what her focus would have been. And Ashley said then she squatted, she took her position, whatever that is that they do, and she looked down the track and returned her attention to her own run and moved into her own experience of the race. And when the gun went off, she ran her best time ever and took first place in the event. So I want to talk to you this morning about the fingerprints of a champion. The fingerprints of a champion. We've been working our series on healing, looking at the healing miracles of Jesus, and Jesus left behind fingerprints, if you will, or a spiritual blueprint for us to follow. He was always teaching, always demonstrating, and if we can look spiritually at what he was saying and discern spiritually what he was saying, he was leaving fingerprints for us to follow in creating and developing a consciousness of healing life. So today I want to finish our series on spiritual wisdom for healing. I've had an opportunity all week to practice all the truth I know to keep my voice ready for you today. But in our series we've said that Jesus really, when he talked about healing, used one word, and that to describe healing, and that was belief. And he said that unbelief doesn't cause illness, but it can interfere with your healing. And we'll see that again in the story that we're using today. We also said that true healing is not subject to time, it's not subject to its duration, it's not influenced by the statistics for recovery, it's not limited to the pattern that's always run true to that condition. And last week we looked at Myrtle Fillmore. The legacy really of Unity was founded on healing, and she said that true healing is of God, that we don't deny that you have an illness, and we don't not go to doctors. We go first to God and then to man as God directs, right? But we don't deny that you have an illness, but we do deny, we use denials to deny that illness has any ultimate power over the ultimate power of the Christ within you. That the illness has no power over the Christ Spirit, the Christ consciousness of life that's in you. That the God self of you doesn't know disease, doesn't know lack, doesn't know limitation. It only knows and lives and breathes and sources us as perfection and wholeness and life. And when we get in alignment with that and get everything else out of the way, then we have that restoration of perfect health. So today, in our last lesson on spiritual wisdom for healing, I want to look at one of the fingerprints that Jesus left for us in terms of developing a healing consciousness. And it comes from the story in the Gospel of Mark where Jesus healed the boy who had a demonic influence. But before we look at the story, I want to ask you, here's your pop quiz for the Bible. And some of you who grew up in Bible churches maybe would know this, but who is the character in the Bible, or the characters in the Bible, who always, always, always recognize Jesus as the Christ? They never have any doubt or any hesitation. Who are the characters in Scripture that always, always, always know Jesus the minute he comes into the environment or the experience? Who knows? Who? Peter, John? Women? Mary? Those are all really good guesses, but they're not right. It's demons, devils, and unclean spirits. When Jesus comes into the experience, they start to freak out because they know that the Christ, the universal Christ consciousness, has the power to destroy them. Right? Demons, devils, and unclean spirits. Always, always, always know it's Jesus. It's the Christ. Here, let's watch this. You can see it a little bit in this Gospel of Mark. When they came to the disciples, they saw a great crowd around them, and some scribes arguing with them. When the whole crowd saw him, they were immediately overcome with awe, and they ran forward to greet him. And he asked them, "What are you arguing about?" He said, "Someone from the crowd answered him, 'Teacher, I brought you my son. He has a spirit that makes him unable to speak. And whenever it seizes him, it dashes him down. And he foams and he grinds his teeth and he becomes rigid. And I asked your disciples to cast it out, but they could not do so.' And he answered them," and sometimes Jesus' words are really interesting, "You faithless generation, how long must I be with you?" Now, it's like you're not getting it, you know. It's like the disciples followed him and all, you know, and even at the very end of his life, he's saying, "Do you guys not get it yet? You know, I got to go away because if I stick around, you're never going to capture the essence of what I'm teaching. You faithless generation, how much longer must I be among you? Bring him to me." And they brought the boy to him, and when the spirit saw him, immediately it convulsed the boy. You know, what's happening here? Here's Jesus on the scene. And he fell on the ground and he rolled about, foaming at the mouth. And Jesus asked the father, "How long has this been happening to him?" Now, this is one of the rare instances where Jesus asks about the history of the illness, because he's making a point that sometimes some things get lodged in us, get stuck in us. Error thinking, negative thinking, bad patterns of thinking get stuck in us, and it can happen to us in childhood, and then we get that imprint on our consciousness, and it stays with us, and it drives us into negativity. It drives us into illness. It drives us into shame and fear and regret and all kinds of things. So he says, "How long has this been happening to him?" And he said, "From childhood. It has often cast him into the fire and into the water to destroy him. But if you are able to do anything, have pity on us and help us." And again Jesus said to him, "If you are able, all things can be done for the one who," what? Believes. There it is. It's not unbelief that's causing it, but it's belief that's going to bring your healing. Immediately the father of the child cried out, a very beautiful word. He said, "I believe, help my unbelief." Isn't that great? You know, we want to be well. I believe, God, help the parts of me that doubt. Help the parts of me that get discouraged. Help the parts of me that can't hang on, that can't sit in prayer even 15 minutes a day when I really know that that's the thing that's going to work best for me. I believe. Help my unbelief. And when Jesus saw that a crowd came running together, he rebuked the unclean spirit. See, he took authority and dominion, saying to it, you spirit that keeps this boy from speaking and hearing, I command you, come out of him and never enter him again. And after crying out and convulsing him terribly, it came out, and the boy was like a corpse, so that most of them said, he is dead. But Jesus took him by the hand and lifted him up, and he was able to stand. And when he had entered the house, his disciples asked him privately, how come we couldn't heal him? And he said, this kind can come out only through prayer. Only through prayer. So lots of amazing things going on in this story that I want to talk about this morning as we see this fingerprint of healing that he left for us. Some speculate that the boy had epilepsy because of the symptoms that are described. But it doesn't matter what the illness was. What we see in the story is that it was long-standing. How long has he had this? Since childhood. Something in you that's been long-standing. I've never felt good enough. I've never felt, whatever. I've had depression since I was a child. Secondly, it appears very hard to overcome. The disciples, and we know from all of Phil's teaching, the disciples are the 12 spiritual faculties that can do anything and everything, right? And yet they said, how come we couldn't heal that? And what that shows us is that they're still developing in consciousness. They're still developing in consciousness, and they're still subject to their humanness in us, their polarity powers. Thirdly, it can't be healed by the intellect alone, whatever this is in you. The Father represents the intellect, the thinking nature. Jesus, of course, is the Christ, fully awake and functioning in us. So, the Father in the story, the intellect, comes to the universal Christ consciousness and asks for healing of his Son. His Son is an offspring, a thought, a lesser thought of the dominant intellect. And it's somehow become possessed by some kind of negativity, some kind of error thinking that's driving it. We hear in the story it often cast him into the waters to drown him. That's probably the waters of depression. It often threw him in the fire to destroy him. That's the fire of addiction. Something's got a hold of him. Something's got a hold of him, and it's a lesser thought, but it's driving him. The demon, metaphysically, is a condition in mind that's been developed using our creative power in the wrong way. What does that look like? The demon of jealousy, the demon of anger, the demon of addiction. You've been consumed with something, with rage, whatever it is, it's gotten a hold of you. It's not real, but it's been there long enough. How long has he had it? Since childhood? It's been there long enough that it's anchored itself in you, and it has to be cast out by the authority of the Christ. So, Myrtle Fillmore said, we can acquire an accumulation of negative thoughts and beliefs which appear so real to the senses that we accept them as our destiny. Oh, I'm bipolar. Oh, I have diabetes. Because the symptoms seem so real to the intellect. These false ideas this is Myrtle again, these false ideas have been believed for so long that they have come to be regarded as truth. It's just the way I am. I can't help myself. I've tried to overcome this. I can't beat this thing, right? These false ideas have been believed for so long that they have come to be regarded as truth. And we labor under the delusion that we're born to live with sickness or sorrow or limitation. But it's a lie. Myrtle Fillmore says, and Emily Cady says, it's the father of all lies. That it's a false standard of normal. Now, when you watch the television news today, And the false ideas have been believed for so long that they've come to be regarded as truth, but it's a lie. It's a false standard of normal. I think we call that now alternative facts. You've accepted alternative facts, and you're trying to make abnormal things appear normal. But it's not the truth of you. There's life in you, there's health in you, there's joy in you, there's stamina and strength and power in you. Jesus knew that the evidence of the senses can appear very real to the intellect. You know, we judge by what we see and what we think. But he knew that they had no ultimate reality over the Christ. The ultimate reality is the unchanging perfection of spirit in you, the unchanging perfection of life in you. And so he showed us how to cast it out, how to cast out that long-standing thing, those feelings of inferiority, those feelings of inadequacy, the feelings that never anything goes right my way. Other people have all the luck. I only ever have bad luck. All those mantras that we've taken hold of that are not normal, and we've tried to make them normal in our lives. It's time for that to stop. Jesus said we have to cast that out. And so he always made himself one with God. The Father and I are one. And he always denied that the sickness had any power and demonstrated ultimate power, the ultimate power of the Christ. And we see him take authority. Said the crowd came running. So the Father's there, who's the intellect. The Son is there, who's the lesser thought that's been driving in negation. And all the crowd comes running. And I'm forever grateful to my licensed Unity teacher, Wanda Lynch, who said, remember the crowd? It's always the crowd of thought. They're your thought people. They're all those thought people that come running. So Jesus has assembled all of your thoughts. And he demonstrates, I command you to come out of him and never enter him again. Christ takes ultimate authority over the crowd, over the Father, over the Son, over the demonic spirit. I command you to come out of him, and healing is total and complete, and never enter him again. And he sets in motion a divine idea of life and health, a spiritualized thought that when held to will produce. Will cast out anything unlike itself. So there's no more room for that habitual thought of inferiority or depression or anxiety or illness or whatever it is, you see. And then, later, in the quiet, when he's with the disciples, so how come we couldn't do this? And that's when he gives us the fingerprint. He said, this kind goes not out but by prayer. Prayer. By putting your fingertips on the imprints of the Christ and allowing whatever it is in you that's been there for all those years to float up and be cast out. Now here's what I have found that looks like in us practically. As you begin to change your thinking to reflect only the attributes of God. You know, you've been thinking that you have issues with depression or issues with anger or issues with jealousy or issues with a tumor in your body, whatever it is. And as you begin to change your thinking to reflect only the attributes of God, and you make a commitment and you take dominion and authority to resolve this once and for all, to allow the Christ of your being to heal you and cast out anything that's getting in the way of your total and complete well-being. What happens? What I've noticed is that everything that's unlike God will float up into your awareness to be cast out. But here's the thing. The way I like to envision it, this isn't years of analysis, this isn't psychiatry, this isn't any of that. All kinds of hurts and unprocessed negativity are going to rise up to be cast out. And what you do when you catch it right there in your awareness is it's like taking a feather duster and dusting away cobwebs. That's the gentleness. There's no pain, there's no anxiety, there's no going to analysis for years. you've taken dominion and authority to let it come up and out of you, and whatever in you is blocking your healing is going to float up. And this happens like when you're driving in your car. Something, all of a sudden you think about something that happened on the playground when you were 6 years old. And then later on, maybe you're in the shower and that time in 7th grade when you felt bullied. And later on, maybe you're thinking about the disappointment you felt over not getting that job you really wanted, and because you had your whole storyline set in, I'm going to get that job, I'm going to make that income, I'm going to buy that house, and it didn't work out. And you had all that disappointment. Just feather duster. Like, these are cobwebs in your mind. Maybe all of a sudden, a few days later, you're thinking about some really unkind, maybe rude remarks you made in an argument to someone, and you have a lot of regret about that. You have to let what's being cast out come up and be out of you. But once you've made the declaration, you don't have to spend any time dwelling on it. You don't have to analyze it. You don't have to, you just wipe it away. Wipe it away. And what happens then is you can hardly remember it. Once it's out of you, once it's been cast out of you, you can't remember it. You know, you can think about, well, that happened in junior high on the playground, and then it's out of you now, and you've wiped it away. It's gone. It's been cleansed. It's been purged out of you, and you can't remember it. As you take action to turn your life toward complete healing, the crystallized thoughts that have been lodged in you somewhere that are restricting that long time, that healing that's taken a long time to come, those thoughts, the things you haven't thought of for years, will begin to float up, break up, and be cast out. But they're cast out in the authority and the dominion of the Christ, and never to enter you again. You don't remember them. They're gone forever. Isn't that a great feeling? They're gone forever. When both Marion Jones and Ashley were running, I love to watch how they would access the one mind of movement and speed, the universal Christ consciousness of movement and speed, so that when Ashley put her fingers on the starting line, most athletes say you're in the zone, right? You're in the zone. I mean, there was a unification of the universal Christ consciousness as movement and speed. And Marion would say, you can access it just the same as I access it. Ashley would say, if you want to be a runner and you access movement and speed will reveal itself to you, will express itself in your life. Ashley tried to, when she put her fingers on the starting line, she tried to match her thoughts to what Marion might have been thinking. And then she pulled herself back to match her thoughts to what she was created to do, which was to run in movement and speed. And she ran a perfect race. She was empowered by the Christ Spirit to run a perfect race. This kind goes not out but by prayer and fasting, by unification with the Spirit of God within. You have the power to choose to turn your thoughts outward toward the illness or inward to the influence of God, to the unchanging perfection of the Christ. You see, as you keep your mind turned inward, the fingerprints for healing will be there to guide you. And the fingerprint he left us in this story is that some things only go out by prayer. And when you take the dominion and authority of the Christ toward that issue, anything unlike God will float up for you to wipe away. The psalmist gave us an anchoring statement. I will give thanks unto thee, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are thy works, and that my soul knows right well. You are fearfully and wonderfully made. There is a pattern of perfection in you. And when you claim dominion and authority of that, everything unlike that will be released from you. And if it's been blocking your healing in any way, it will be cast out. So let's take that idea for just a moment into a time of prayer so we can give you a blessing this morning. I invite you to take a moment, and Sharon can put a little music behind me here. That psalmist word, I will give thanks unto thee, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are thy works, and that my soul knows right well. Your soul knows the truth of your being. You are ageless, deathless, eternal spirit. And every challenge in life is an opportunity to put your fingers into the fingerprints of the healing life of the Christ. And when you do that, you can let go of old, worn-out ways of living and being and doing and thinking and speaking that have been a limitation. And you can turn within to this divine patterning of life and health. So I invite you to claim for yourself this morning, I am wholeness and life. I am goodness and truth. I am happiness and love. I am guided and directed and sustained by the life of God. I now praise my body for its rapid return to health and perfection. I will give thanks unto thee, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are thy works, and that my soul knows right well. Thank you, God, for healing life for each one here today. Vibrant, vitally radiant, enthusiastic, joyous life. And so it is. Amen. Thank you.